Doom: The Dark Ages boldly introduces some of the franchise's most destructive weaponry to date. The bone-shattering gameplay often feels faster than Doom Eternal, traditional synced glory kills are actually returning, and the dragon combat is disappointingly repetitive. We'll be discussing all of that and a whole lot more in this exciting hands-on preview of Doom's ambitious dive into the twisted medieval world of Argent d'Nor. Thanks to the good folks over at Bethesda, id Software, and Microsoft, I was just recently given the opportunity to play several hours of Doom: The Dark Ages. So trust me when I say that you are not prepared for this. The power fantasy has been cranked up past 11. This is, without a doubt, the most vicious any Doom game has ever felt. I was allowed to blast through a curated demo that included the full opening level along with a handful of additional mission segments, and I was consistently impressed with the level of raw strength and deep impact contained within every single input. The feature that best represents the surprising speed and unyielding savagery of this entry's overall gameplay loop is the drastically improved melee system, which was honestly one of my favorite parts of the entire experience. The teaser trailers and gameplay deep dives have not done this feature justice. Moving through battalions of corrupted foot soldiers using a series of swift but thunderous melee strikes feels smooth as butter, and stopping a heavier demon dead in his tracks with a devastating blow is one of the most satisfying things the Dark Ages has to offer. Everything is very tightly connected in a way that makes the entire combat loop feel like second nature. You'll be able to easily slip into an ever-flowing cycle of shredding through Hellspawn with the Slayer's new torture machines, pulverizing lesser monsters with melee strikes, and then parrying incoming attacks to instantly replenish one of your 3 available charges. Calling it intuitive would be an understatement. A single button press allows you to refill your ammo supply, dish out solid damage capable of faltering heavier demons, and perform glory kills all without disrupting the flow of combat. Admittedly, I was initially a little disappointed to see that the synced glory kill animations were mostly removed, but after getting the chance to actually experience Doom: The Dark Ages for myself, I can very confidently say that the changes they made to the finisher system were undeniably for the better. The game is set up so that players will never have to stop during the heat of battle to gather more resources or finish off enemies, so the decision to turn these synced executions into a natural and interactive extension of the glory strikes results in a combat loop that feels infinitely more fluid than the previous iterations. But for those of you that are still a bit worried about the changes, you'll be excited to hear that traditional glory kills are returning. Despite what's been shown throughout the various teaser trailers and gameplay deep dives, Dark Ages does offer a handful of predetermined synced animations that seem to activate depending on your positioning and currently equipped melee weapon. During my time with the game, there were several instances where I accidentally landed on a Pinky's back and swiftly removed its head with the shield saw or split an enemy straight down the middle instead of simply dismembering it. There's also a specific type of mini-boss demon that will always be finished with an extended heart-rip glory kill that empowers the Slayer. I'll talk about those guys a bit more here in a minute, but I thought it was worth mentioning while we're on the topic of enemy executions. Experiencing these animations in-game for the first time was unbelievably exciting. I was genuinely blown away by the fact that they somehow managed to flawlessly implement 2 versions of the system in a way that should be able to please most people. I also believe that fans will be incredibly happy with the hard-hitting gunplay, which, in my opinion, is the best in the entire franchise. Every tool of mass destruction in the arsenal has a uniquely meaty punch that echoes throughout each animation and sound effect. The immense power of the Slayer is noticeably present no matter which medieval meat grinder you've got in your hands. The ancient Sentinel Reaver is one of Dark Age's most interesting weapons. I didn't spend a whole lot of time with the ball launcher since it was unlocked halfway through the closing mission, but I still thoroughly enjoyed bludgeoning rows of imps at surprisingly long ranges when I could. It honestly looks like they finally managed to create an all-around solid set of weapons that will be able to hold their own in most situations throughout the entire campaign, instantly making this interpretation of the arsenal a notable step up from 2016 and Eternal. The lightweight machine blasters that you would normally expect to feel weaker are still capable of producing a formidable amount of damage without compromising speed or impact. The Railspike Shredder variant and single-barreled accelerator aren't any less competent than something like the Sentinel Reaver, although I will say that the twin-barreled accelerator is much more impressive than its standard iteration. My favorite weapon out of the bunch was the Triple Burst Combat Shotgun, which has a tight spread, high rate of fire, and the ability to ignite demons for armor shards after several consecutive shots. It's a very different direction for the starting shotgun that not only gives it an increased level of late-game efficiency, but but also further differentiates it from its alternative upgrade mode, the Super Shotgun. This might actually be the strongest I have ever felt when firing a weapon in a Doom game. The slow load time between each shot, insane crowd control capabilities, and spectacular sound design will make each blast seem like it could genuinely blow a hole into the surface of Mars. As far as I'm aware, it's the only standard firearm that has a relatively low default ammo count, since nearly everything else is meant to be fired continuously in tandem with melee strikes and shield bashes. Some of you will certainly be disappointed that continuous fire and ability combos are replacing quick swapping as the new meta, but I think that most will come to enjoy it after giving it a try. The Dark Ages enemy roster feels much more diverse and fleshed out than any of the titles that came before it. Destroying weak points and exploiting enemy weaknesses have taken a bit of a backseat. Eliminating hordes of fodder, weaving between dense seas of projectiles, parrying ferocious incoming attacks, and breaking through heated armor plating will take priority when diving into the larger combat encounters. The challenging but enjoyable cyber demons were definitely a standout amongst the returning monsters, but my personal favorite was probably the Nightmare Imp. I am a huge fan of their Doom 64 counterpart and was really hoping that they would make a comeback. Seeing them in the battlefield again was utterly thrilling. I got to face off against two unique types of demons, with those being a sort of buff banner demon that empowers everything around it until being taken out, and a special mini-boss that can't take damage until the surrounding enemies have been eliminated. Both of them are pretty solid ideas, but I thought that the empowered banner creatures had a bit too much health compared to their normal counterparts, and I didn't like how much damage I needed to dish out with such a limited arsenal. The mini-boss encounters, on the other hand, were perfectly fine. Having an indestructible, super-powered threat looming in the background while you try to deplete its morale meter by mercilessly exterminating its backup added an extra layer to those fights. And it's pretty cool that finishing the experience rewards you with either an upgrade to your health, armor, or ammo capacity. The promotional materials imply that you'll be a slow and methodical tank who's constantly glued to the ground, but I actually found that to be completely false more often than not. This entry's improved momentum system and nearly unlimited stamina allows you to rapidly pick up speed as you manually sprint across war-torn battlefields with booming footsteps and leap into the air using a new charge jump ability. While the movement does contain a powerful level of weight that makes you feel like a sledgehammer hurtling towards the skulls of the damned, full force running and leaping made me feel even faster than I did in Doom Eternal, and that's without making any changes to the gameplay sliders. The combat is designed in such a way where you won't be able to avoid all incoming damage despite being able to move further and higher than previously thought, so properly utilizing the shield saw will be an absolute necessity that simply can't be avoided. I'm typically not a big fan of parrying mechanics in modern games, but getting used to the basic shield inputs was even easier than integrating melee into my playstyle, and that's really saying something. Blocking and parrying both add an extra layer of depth to the combat loop while still managing to carry an admirable level of responsiveness. It has no problem comfortably sneaking its way into the control scheme and your playstyle. Alongside a variety of environmental actions, throwing the shield saw is mostly used for abruptly cutting down armies of fodder and continuously stunning anything larger than a modern imp, which is a good thing since you'll frequently need to temporarily disable heavies before they can bombard you with high damage attacks. It can also burst enemy shields and body armor, although the materials will first have to be superheated with consistent gunfire or heavy melee strikes. At times, this does make some of the tankier enemies feel a bit spongy, but quickly wiping out a wide wall of shield units felt even better than disabling weak points with precision shots in Doom Eternal. While a good portion of the footage you've seen so far has been my own, I'll be using a lot of B-roll going forward since I wasn't allowed to capture the first few levels, story elements, or gameplay of the Atlan Mech, Cyber Dragon, and the heavy-duty turret, which is yet to be shown publicly. I was the most worried about combat vehicles heading into the demo, so I'm pleased to report that the Mech segment was a genuine blast. Beating the absolute shit out of Titan demons using a combo of jabs, kicks, uppercuts, and charged rocket punches was much more exciting than I thought it would be. Every hit produced a shockwave that really made me feel like I was piloting a super-powered robot the size of a skyscraper. The base movement is a little slower than I would like, although having the ability to both backdash and crash throughout the environment using a charged sprint more than made up for that. I only got around 15 minutes with the mech, so I can't comment on how everything will feel 10 hours into the game, but as it stands, the only thing about it that didn't really interest me was the chain gun. Ballistic weapons are not a part of your normal toolkit. You'll be able to pick them up as you traverse each level and use them until their power runs out or you complete the mission. The chain gun was definitely impactful, but it was a bit one note in comparison to the mech standard abilities, at least from what I got to experience. I'm fairly disappointed to say that I found the entirety of the dragon combat to also be one-note and repetitive. Traversing the environments felt a little sluggish even with the thrusters activated, and the starting combat loop essentially consists of locking onto a target and holding down the trigger as you weave between projectiles. There's definitely more to it as you progress and unlock new abilities, but I can only speak on what I actually played. So my first overall impression is that the dragon gameplay loop leaves a lot to be desired at its very core. You can perform really cool synced glory kills on Titan demons after wearing them down, but I only saw the same two over and over again, which certainly didn't help with the overall repetitiveness. My least favorite part of the entire experience was the brief turret segment. In the first level, Hell is making a huge push into a very important Sentinel city, and it's up to the Slayer to ensure that the area doesn't fall. As they make their final attack, you have to get behind a mounted chain gun turret and fight off waves of fodder and heavies, which once again felt very one-note as I was pretty much just holding down the trigger and moving the camera back and forth. You can eventually fire an explosive Arbalest bolt after inflicting a certain number of damage, but it just didn't do nearly enough to make the weapon appealing. Something that did tickle my fancy, however, was the new expanded levels that feature tons of hidden paths and backtracking. Some areas did feel a little empty as I was walking through them for the second time, although that wasn't really a concern since I almost always had something to focus on. Doom Eternal's collectible toys and the bonus extra lives could be found throughout hidden alcoves alongside special dungeons with unique encounters and tons of rewards. Some secrets will have you walking through boarded up areas where Sentinel civilians are taking refuge and they timidly whisper about the Slayer as he passes. That fear plays a lot into the game's narrative and how the Sentinels see the hero who's pulling them back from the brink of utter annihilation, which is portrayed a bit differently than it was in Eternal since the Slayer's mind is being cleansed by the makers to make him nothing but an emotionless killing machine filled with only raw hatred. Conflict immediately starts to brew as some of Argent D'Nur's warriors disagree with the mind control, but I unfortunately didn't get to see that expanded upon as most of the narrative elements were pulled from the demo. Even with the overall lack of cutscenes, I was still given a chance to familiarize myself with several new and returning characters on both sides of the war. The large maker seen in the developer direct is called the Creed Maker, and he seems to have a pretty big role within the story. King Novik, Commander Thera, Commander Valen, and every maker working on the mobile battle stations report back to him, as he's the one who calls the shots and supplies the devices keeping Doomguy under control. There was a brief moment where the Slayer fights back and breaks free from the device, but an increase in the voltage output subdues him so the makers and Sentinels can launch him into the active war zone on the planet of Abeth. The higher-ups of Hell have really started to notice how much of an impact the Marine is having on their invasion of Argent D'Nur. There's an extended cutscene where Prince Ozrak meets with a nasty-looking Hell Priest and a mysterious outsider known only as the Witch to debate their next move now that Doomguy has been given divine power. As surprising as this may sound, I was honestly pretty captivated throughout most of the cutscenes, especially when the demons were tearing survivors apart on the burning streets of Kalim as the Hell Lords started to almost panic over the Slayer's unexpected arrival. I know that some people really won't like the inclusion of lengthy cutscenes, but I really do believe that they're interesting enough to grab the attention of most players. The soundtrack was much more dramatic and noticeably cinematic during the narrative segments, but it immediately started to pick up once the combat began. Finishing Move has managed to produce a brilliant set of heavy and dark tracks that perfectly represents every aspect of the game. It's a brutal symphony of raw metal that expands upon the previous two entries, pays respects to the classics, and carves its own spot into Doom's long history of generational bangers. There wasn't a single moment where the music felt dull or out of place. I'm very impressed by how easily they were able to accomplish such a monumental feat. If you have any questions that weren't answered in the preview, leave them in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them in a follow-up Q&A where I'll provide even more information within the next week. Thanks again to the wonderful and kind people at Bethesda, id Software, and Microsoft for inviting me down to the hands-on Doom the Dark Ages preview event. And thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. That's pretty much all that I have for now, though. Until next time.